The first text I saw was a picture of my couch. It was me, my living room, my plant with the dead leaf I never had time to trim, the throw pillow my mother bought me for my birthday. The caption was just a heart emoji and the tag, her new home. She took my job, my boyfriend, and my name, then opened my front door like nothing happened. I read those words and stared at the photo until the edges of the screen blurred. I'd worked at Harlow and Finch for 6 years. I was the one who stayed late to fix other people's decks, who brought donuts to Friday meetings, who mapped the client strategy that pulled them out of a slump. My title was Senior Content Strategist, and I believed it meant something. I believed it so much I didn't notice how fast she was watching me. Her name was Naomi. She'd been hired as a contractor 3 months before my surgery. She had perfect teeth and a LinkedIn that looked like a fantasy. She smiled in front of the CEO and used phrases like synergy and lean in the exact cadence they liked. When my doctor told me 3 weeks in advance that I needed a minor procedure and would be out for 8 weeks, I'd handed her the deck and the client roster, like handing over a baby, careful, exact, full of trust. I woke up from anesthesia with texts asking for screenshots of files. I sent them. I was naive in a way that felt criminal now. The first crack was an email from HR titled Team Reassignment. It said my client would be transitioned to interim coverage and that Naomi would be taking over the account. It said manager needed a temporary change to maintain momentum. There was no temp designation beneath her name. She had my project, my slides, my outline. I tried to call my manager. He said, sorry. Talks already happened. We'd talk when I was back. That night, I sat in a dark apartment and listened to the refrigerator make small, angry noises. 2 weeks later, I found a photo. Mark and Naomi smiling at a cheap archway, champagne glasses raised. Someone in the comments wrote, congrats, weird timing. Mark and I had been together 3 years. We'd lived together, picked paint swatches, joked about anyone who expected him to grow up fast until suddenly he did. His message when I wrote to ask what that photo was about said I was overreacting. He said we needed space. He didn't call back. I learned a brutal arithmetic in those 3 days. Naomi had slid into both my worlds. She'd slid into my inbox and my bed. She'd put up a photo with the ring and the caption starting fresh, and then she did the thing I still think about in the middle of the night. She changed her Instagram handle to include his last name. That last name was the one I had said, joking at dinner, that I would probably take one day. I kept reading the profile until my vision doubled. She had taken my future like it was a spare sweater. When I got home from the hospital, my key still fit the lock. My landlord had texted a week earlier that rent was late. I'd been too sick to care. The lease was in my name, obviously. I assumed that meant I still had a home. I opened the door and saw Mark unpacking. He looked at me like someone who practiced grief in a mirror and perfected his lines. Naomi came out of the bedroom pushing a box with my neighbor's sticker on it. She opened our front door like she belonged there. She smiled in the kitchen and said, "Oh, you're back." No, pause. No hello. Not even the trace of guilt you get from someone who's just stolen a life. Everything in me narrowed down to a single stupid thing. Keys. Mark had a spare. He'd given it to her, probably the night the ring photo was taken. He told me she wanted to sleep over because she worked late. He told me a lot of things he'd practiced. Then he told me he didn't love me. Naomi put a bowl of cereal on the counter like this was a domestic sitcom. I didn't freak out in the moment. I cleaned out a drawer and left. I texted Lydia. Lydia's been my friend since grad school, the person whose apartment keys I hide when I'm too drunk to remember my own name. She answered in 16 seconds. Get out, she said. We'll figure it out. The first plan was simple. Evidence. Naive me thought that if I gathered proof of what Naomi had done, copyrighted decks, email timestamps, messages where she asked for my files, the company would backtrack. Proof held weight. Proof was a lever. I opened Slack and my sent folder, combed through old files, downloaded presentation versions with track changes, and saved them into a folder called Proof. I forwarded it to HR with a cover note that was short and furious. You can't just reassign my client while on medical leave. This was not a handoff. HR replied with corporate calm. Investigations take time. Meanwhile, Naomi was making LinkedIn posts about stepping up to new challenges. The second plan was messy and human. I couldn't just live in evidence. I called Mark. He said he'd wanted to be honest, but I wasn't listening. He asked me to stop showing up at the apartment for everyone's sake. He'd packed some of my things already. He put a shirt in a box and labeled it with my name. We had a friends and family meeting that weekend, Lydia, my sister, and 2 coworkers who didn't know the whole story. The coworkers looked guilty in that particular way coworkers do when they see a project shift in their inbox and immediately update their calendar invites. Lydia paced and suggested legal counsel. My sister grabbed my phone and showed me my own name trending on Naomi's profile under the ring photo, a string of mean comments, the word opportunist tattooed across it. My boss messaged that he was sorry for how things played out and that the company wanted me back when I was ready. When I was ready was a passive sentence that dunked a grenade next to my head. Then Naomi knocked on my building's common door. She smiled in the lobby at Mrs. Carter and complimented her potted fern. She knew everyone's names in the building within a week. She had keys. She opened my front door again that afternoon because she'd forgotten something. She acted surprised to see me standing in the hallway. The elevator dinged like a laugh. Someone at work leaked the rest of the story. I'd been an older hire, a woman in a mid-level job with a messy medical absence. Naomi was younger, hungry, and likely to stay until she got what she wanted. She had taken the deck and polished it. She had taken Mark because he showed up at the fundraiser where she was charming the board. She'd taken my name because she'd taken the future I'd been planning with him and then signed her Instagram with the same last name I'd planned to wear. The rumor mill invented the motive. She wanted security. She wanted pedigree. People like neat stories. I did something crazy. I showed up at the office on a Wednesday, 2 weeks post-op, and asked for a meeting with the CEO. I waited in a glass box of a room while he filled his coffee and rearranged his pen. Then I laid out every file, every email, every time-sensitive draft I'd left with Naomi. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I spoke in short sentences and pushed the proof folder across the table. He listened and blinked like the documents were a cold slap. He said he was surprised and promised an urgent review. This was the false victory. HR called me 2 days later and said the review was over. They determined no policy violations and thanked me for my service. Naomi kept her promotion. Naomi came into work the next Monday with a bouquet and a story about stepping into leadership. The CEO sent her a company-wide shout-out. He clapped and handed her ribbon-cutting task he'd never given me. The false victory came when Mark called an hour after the review and said he'd left Naomi. He said he'd been stupid and panicked and chose wrong. He wanted to come back. He sent a photo of a packed duffel bag on his bed as proof he'd left. My stomach folded in half at the sight of that duffel like a trap closing. I invited him to coffee. He cried and said he regretted everything and that Naomi had been manipulative, that she'd told him I'd left him, that she'd made him believe I'd signaled it by my recovery weeks. I wanted to toss the duffel into the street and burn every photo. I wanted to forgive because forgiving would make him like he used to be. I said no. That was the turning point. It felt small and giant at the same time. I texted Lydia, "I'm done begging ghosts in other people's clothes." She wrote back, "Good. Start packing your things. I say you go public." Public was scary because it meant losing control. It meant exposing every private wobble, the leaks, my surgery, the nights I cried in the bathtub. But it also meant not letting Naomi's neat little story be the only one anyone could tell. I wrote a post that night. I did not name names. I did something more dangerous. I told the truth in a way that sat in the middle of the room. I was out for medical leave. I wrote, "My project files were taken and reassigned without discussion. My partner left while I recovered. I am not ashamed that I was sick. I am not ashamed that my life was inconvenient. I am tired of people thinking that a woman's absence is an opportunity." I linked to the proof folder, which I had uploaded to a download link. I hit post. The fallout was a hurricane. Some people called me messy. Others called me brave. The company launched a real investigation. Naomi's inbox began to fill with messages she couldn't practice her perfect smile for. Mark, who'd hung onto the duffel like a relic, called and didn't leave a coherent message. He texted once, "Can we talk?" I did not answer. Weeks bled into headlines on industry blogs about workplace conduct and toxic climbing. The CEO apologized in a memo that read like someone trying on a new suit. Naomi was put on leave pending review. Mark posted a public apology that read like litigation prevention. He wrote that he was sorry and that he'd made mistakes and that he was seeking therapy. The comments were brutal and some of them were kind. None of them fixed the hole. I got my job back after 6 weeks of HR interviews and a quiet settlement that said I'd been wronged and that the company would do better. Naomi's contract ended. She deleted her social media and reappeared months later with a small boutique and a mild, unapologetic smile. The name thing, Mark's name, was the hardest. Some nights I woke up expecting to hear him cough in the kitchen or the click of keys on my desk. It took me months to stop dreaming of her opening my front door like it was her right. It took me longer to stop catching my breath at every knock. The day she did open my front door in front of me again, months later, was anticlimactic. She had a box. I had a lawyer and a friend and a shot of bourbon in a thermos, because I have learned the value of small comforts. She looked different in daylight. The hair was still exact. Her smile had lost its edges. She said hi, like she had always known me. I had answers then. I had my job back, a new freelance contract that paid better than my old salary ever had, and a new house key that only fit one lock. I had boundaries. I had Lydia. I had my name, my actual name intact, not because someone else hadn't tried it on, but because I chose not to let their theft define it. I told her she had no right to be in my building. She stared like I was a ghost. She said she didn't mean to hurt anyone. I said people who say they didn't mean to never get to open other people's doors. She left without argument. Later that week, she sent a message through a mutual friend. I didn't know how to be anything else. I should have told you I'm sorry. I didn't reply. There's no neat ending where I get everything back exactly as it was. Jobs are not the same twice. People change. I still think about Mark sometimes when a song comes on or when I pass a park bench where we used to argue about which Chinese place made the best dumplings. But the house is mine again, the plant is finally thriving, and I start work at 9 instead of apologizing for starting at 10. I learned something awful and useful. The people who can take your life will take it if you let them. The ones who cannot be left with nothing but your work and your silence. So I stopped being silent. When Naomi opened my front door like nothing had happened, I did not scream. I locked the door behind her when she left. I filed the legal paperwork. I changed the locks. Then I sat on the couch in the plant light and wrote the project deck that would win us a new client. I texted Lydia a single word, coffee. She answered with a photo of her own couch, a messy throw, and a single heart emoji. We sat together the next morning and planned how to make sure no one could open our doors and call it home.